We are back again for the final time in 2022. We have a great interview and some exciting news from the past couple weeks in Indie Ball. You don't want to miss this episode of the Indie Ball Report podcast. We're back again, episode number 199 of the Indie Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, he's Will. We're closing on 200. 200 is going to be the first one of 2023, which is kind of fun how that wound up working itself out. So that's pretty
what
good.
What are the odds?
I know, really. I would have required basically skipping a month a while back. So good thing that happened. So it worked out good there. We're off the heels of our Q&A episode, which seems like a lot of people liked it. Seems like we got good feedback on it. Always like doing that episode. So this week we're back to our usual pace of things. We got some news from the past couple weeks. And on top of that, we also have a great interview with the Windy City Thunderbolts general manager, Mike VerSchave, who you're going to be hearing from in just a minute. So overall, it's going to be a pretty good week.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Q&A episode kind of puts, because I believe the Taggart news was technically last week. Yeah. So, but, it's the off season. It's around the new year. There's usually not a ton. So to get that little kind of news dump there as well, just, gives us something to talk about along with peak interview season, I think you could say. Oh,
it absolutely is peak interview season. And, like you said, well, it's the off season. We're not getting too much news flying at us too quickly. So if it waits a week, it waits a week. And there was some other stuff. I mean, like there's been more Banana Ball too. But I mean, like at a certain point, we say what we can say about, which is Banana Ball is coming to more and more indie ball parks because it's popular. It's great for filling dates. It doesn't interfere with the main goal. So it's a positive. I mean, like there's only so many ways we could really phrase that, so, there's that. There's some other news. Well, we mentioned the interview and it makes most sense to get to the interview first. I had a piece of cashew stuck in my tooth. I had to get that out first. Very important. That's important that people know about that. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty solid interview, about 30 minutes long. We talk a little bit about his time in the Frontier League. Been with this organization essentially since 1999. Small little break in there, but otherwise pretty much straight through since then. He's been with what was once the Cook County Cheetahs and now is the Windy City Thunderbolts. So we talk about that. We talk about the All-Star game coming. We talk about getting Richie Sexton to manage this club. A lot of interesting topics. And overall, I think you guys will really enjoy it. So I suppose we could just get right into that interview. Here is our discussion with Windy City General Manager Mike VerSchave. We are back again this week with another terrific episode, another terrific interview to go along with it. And this week, as we mentioned on the Q&A episode last week, we have the general manager of the Windy City Thunderbolts, host of the 2023 Frontier League All-Star Game, Mike VerSchave. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Great, Nick. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure to have you on. And I know we've been dealing with a lot of inclement weather, so I appreciate you being able to fight through that, because I know you guys aren't in the office today because of the weather. So I thought for a second we may have to move it to a different time. So I'm just happy to be able to get it done today and be able to get it up and everything running on time. So I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And I guess what makes most sense to start is talking about the very thing I introduced you with, which is that Frontier League All-Star Game in 2023. Obviously, last year it was in Washington, and now it comes a little bit further west. So it's been some time since Windy City's had an All-Star Game. So I guess just kind of take us through the process of getting it and a little bit about it.
Well, certainly, we are excited to bring the All-Star Game to the south side of Chicago. It has been a long time. You're right. It's last time we had it was when we were called the Cheetahs, Cook County Cheetahs. It was 2001. So it's been over 2 decades. And so I think even though we've been in the league a long time, and I think it was our time to host again. It was beyond time. So we're happy to we were happy to be selected to do it.
So then the process to get the All-Star game, is it more or less the league comes to teams, or do they just kind of throw it out like, hey, who's interested in it? And then they kind of look it over. Like, what's that whole process like to get the All-Star game to your ballpark?
Well, it's more of a, I guess you could call it a seniority sort of thing, where, the longer you haven't had it, the more likely you would have it. In addition to just seeing how it fits geographically, where has it been lately? You don't want to stay on one side of the country. You do kind of want to move it around, especially for a league that's as large as ours, taking up pretty much half the country.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, there's a few things, and usually there's only a few teams that want to do it either for anniversaries, or they haven't done it for a while, or they had some improvements to their ballpark. And so we were in a position to put our name in the hat, and considering we haven't hosted it in so long, we were the one chosen.
Yeah, no, it definitely is good to see it kind of get around, get to some different fan bases that maybe haven't experienced it a lot. So it's just kind of interesting how that system works. Cause I always wondered, cause you see just seemingly random places get picked, but, it does make sense on a seniority or on a make sure everybody gets this kind of basis there. And so I guess I'll continue just going down the rabbit hole on because we're talking about it. Obviously, we know there's going to be the game. We know there's going to be the skills competition, something that I've been on record as saying I'm a huge fan of in the past. That's going to be one of those days. Obviously, we're only in December right now, so looking at an event that's 6 months out is kind of hard to really get everything, real detailed. But what are some of the other points or things you're looking forward to showing off to fans that may be coming in from out of town to watch the All-Star game, or just people that haven't been to the ballpark in a little bit?
Sure. Each team, when they host it, it's kind of a blank slate, right? It's a canvas. And, other than the All-Star game, teams are allowed to get creative. I know in the past, some teams have done, a Battle of the Sexes softball game. I believe Washington did that, not last year, but the previous time they hosted, they had a Battle of the Sexes softball game. Some teams do concerts. Some teams do a traditional home run derby with a concert. It's really up to the host. So, we've been talking about this for years. One of those pie in the sky things that if we ever did get around to hosting it and we felt like we were prepared to host it and ready to host it, we would love to do a skills competition. And so instead of just a straight home run derby and stretching that thing out, we wanted to try to make it unique, and try to change it up a little bit so nothing gets old, even though everybody loves home runs.
Yeah.
In particular, our ballpark is not a home run hitter's park. It's one of the harder places, always one of the best pitchers parks in the league. And so we thought it would be the perfect venue to try something different, add in a bunch of different skills, and see if we can see how unique we can make it and put on a good show for the spectators that day. Yeah,
like with the skills competition, that's the one thing I always liked about was it gives some more diversity to that other day. Because if you're just going for a home run derby, like you say, either it gets stretched out and then it just feels like, well, why am I wasting all this time here? Or it's over real quick and it's kind of like, well, I showed up for a home run derby that lasted 45 minutes. So you give those other players an opportunity to, on some level, showcase themselves. Yeah, but give the fans a diverse experience. So that's certainly something that's very cool to see and something that I've always been a fan of seeing. And I know for me personally, for whether it be NFL or NHL, the skills competition for me was always like the premier event, the one that I made a point of watching. So, going to be interesting.
Well, look at the NBA All-Star game, right? In the skills competition, that dunk competition has sometimes, it's repetitive. It gets a bit stale. And so like my favorite really is the 3-point shot, even though that is repetitive as well. Yeah. Just like I think the dunk competition is equivalent to the home run derby. And there's nothing wrong with adding more to the main course of a skills event.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it showcases players that, they have an extreme talent at one thing or another, but they just never get the opportunity or the stage to be able to show like, hey, I'm the best guy at doing whatever X skill is, but it's still like a tremendous feat to see it. So it is something that's certainly cool. I'm definitely looking forward to. And, naturally, the kind of next place that I want to kind of guide this to is the other piece of really big news that was made, from the Thunderbolts this past offseason, or this current offseason, I suppose, which is you guys hired a new manager, and he's a bit, I guess, well known would be one way of putting it when you hire a major league all-star in Richie Sexton. So I guess what was that hiring process like to get a guy like him in? And, just how do you go about getting a guy like him to manage your team?
Well, I think, I would assume most of the owners in independent baseball have relationships outside of just the Frontier League. They grow up in there's a reason they want to own a baseball team, and they grow up at the game. They grow up in the right circles. They know people. And so, we were lucky enough to have a connection with our current ownership to Richie. And Richie has had this is something that he's wanted to do, for a while. And, an opening, became available for our position. And, one thing leads to another, people talk, and, you get to know somebody. And we felt that, Richie, with his, resume, he has a pretty impressive Major League Baseball career, over 300 home runs and, multiple all-star with Milwaukee. And so it's a nice hire, definitely for name recognition, which is a little different. We've actually had a nice history at the Thunderbolts of hiring people, former major leaguers or people that have gone on to coach in Major League Baseball, currently. And, but again, I think, with the combination of our ownership and talking to Richie, this is something that he really, really wants. And he is jumping into the deep end, and I'm sure, it's going to be a great thing.
Yeah. And I imagine, as a front office, as an organization, getting a guy like that explicitly wants to be there, that wants the job and wants the opportunity to really, prove himself as a manager. Obviously, he's done it as a player 10 times over, but, as a manager, it's still we're still wanting to see how he's going to work out. But to have that kind of guy that wants to be there, wants that chance, I imagine it's special for an organization.
Well, certainly his name, is a big deal to us, and people do know him. Now, with that being said, a super successful, player career doesn't guarantee a super successful, or even a remotely successful managerial career. So this is what's great about this. And Richie, in the multiple times that I've talked to him, many times now, is that it's a new challenge for him. And I think in a way he probably feels that, he's the new kid. He's pretty much a rookie, because he really is as a manager. And so it's his job to learn, from the independent baseball landscape that he's going to be, getting himself into, see what works, see what doesn't. And, it's a brand new journey for him. And I think that our organization is excited, to see how it goes.
Certainly. And I just wonder if he has any sort of a type of philosophy or a certain type of mindset when building this team. Because I know a lot of guys, when we talk to managers and we talk to other organizations, they go, okay, we want a team that, plays fast, is more of a contact-based team. We'll sacrifice power if we can get on base a lot. Other teams are going, we want long balls. We got the kind of ballpark that benefits. Obviously, you mentioned earlier, don't exactly have a ballpark set up for home runs, and it's, more set up for pitchers. So I'm just wondering what's the kind of approach going into the 2023 season, try and build the ball club out?
Richie is aware that the ballpark itself is more, favors pitchers.
Yeah.
He knows that. However, I believe he thinks, And he knows that he's going to be able to find ways to increase production from our offense, no matter who is on the roster. He really thinks he can help these players grow and take another step. And so I would assume, even though I don't really have a comment on his philosophy, he thinks and he knows that he will be able to improve this offense, and hopefully that leads to a few more wins.
Hopefully it does. And that's something I wanted to bring up, because you guys do have a history of winning, more so in a little bit in the past, with 3 championship titles, a bunch of division titles as well. But there's a bit of a playoff drought that's gone on for a little bit of time. And I'm just wondering, is this going to be the year that we're going to see it? Because I know what come to an end, that is, see the drought come to an end, because I know when Richie got announced, there was some conjecture online saying maybe this is going to be what turns it around, and hopefully it is. But I'm just, I had to bring it up. I had to ask.
You're right. We do have a distant history of winning. We had a nice run towards the end of the 2000s, winning a couple championships in a row and making the playoffs multiple times in a row. And you're also right that we have on the field. We've run into some tough times, and it's been now, I think, over 10 years of struggling. And so, with a new manager brings new hope, and with a new manager brings a new vision. And when I'm asked how the team is going to do, I just tell them with a straight face that I think we're going to go 96-0, because I really have no idea. And so I really hope that not only we become more competitive, but that we get some playoff spots in there in the near future, and we could turn this thing around as a baseball organization.
I mean, if nothing else, you guys have the benefit of being in the Frontier League, where you're going to have the Empire State Greys on your schedule. So that's always working in your favor on the field. And with that, I do want to mention the Frontier League, because you've been with the team for a while, and certainly you've seen a lot of change come through the league. So I guess just since the merger, has there been any sort of major effect on Windy City? Obviously, you guys are in the more Western division that didn't really get any Can-Am League teams, but you come out east a bit more, you're going into new markets and whatnot. So I'm just wondering how that merger kind of affects you guys, if at all.
Well, it certainly affects the travel. We go a lot farther than we used to. And the league has, merging with the Can-Am League, was a great thing. It was an exciting moment for the league. And it's also opened up a few doors here, during the process of when Major League Baseball, started cutting from minor league baseball. It opened up some opportunities there. Yep. And because of the size of our league geographically, that will continue to be the case, where opportunities will be around, whether they're in the Ohio Valley, East Side, or around us by the Mississippi. And so, the league we used to be on the west side of the league. We still are on the west side of the league, but there were a lot more teams on the west side of the league. And almost within 3, 4, 5 years, the league has turned a predominantly Eastern Coast League. So it is a little different in that, but I think we've had a lot of our fans mention how awesome it is to see a team from New York come in, whether it be the Valley Cats, or whether it be the Boulders, teams from New Jersey, and then the teams from Canada. It adds credibility to your league. We love our local rivalries with Joliet and Schaumburg. However, when those teams that are coming from such far distance, that's not, anybody who questions the baseball or the dedication of the organizations to the league itself, all those answers should be very easy, considering you just have to look at how big our league is, how long these teams come to play, and our fans really appreciated those different type of opponents.
Yeah, I know certainly being on the East Coast, being in New Jersey, I always liked seeing seeing Schaumburg come through, seeing Windy City come through, seeing these newer teams that, for a while I heard about, I knew about them. Obviously, we followed the Frontier League, but they were kind of more distant teams. So to now actually get some variety in what used to just be the same, like 5 other Can-Am League teams. You'd see Sussex, you'd see, then Rockland. I still call them Rockland Boulders, the multiple Canada teams as well. It got stale, but now having that variety, certainly, at least from my perspective, has definitely been a positive here. And I mentioned the level of play also has gone up some degree here, as there was some change to roster rules to help accommodate that transition for the Can-Am League team, certainly. So I just wonder, how does that affect the team too, having that new kind of roster setup?
Well, the league's certainly older than it once was before the Can-Am merger, and I think the Can-Am being it was an older league, right? It's not. It was at the time of the merger, they truly were 2 totally different leagues, and even with COVID, and it really only this past year has the 2 leagues finally started to intertwine because of COVID, which restricted travel. And, we didn't play in 20. We have a really localized travel in 21 due to COVID.
Yeah.
So just last year was the first time that our leagues, other than seeing it on a piece of paper, where our teams actually played each other, and you finally got a feel for the 2 leagues actually being one. And so when Can-Am came in, our league, you want to make transitions easier. And so, whether it would be an additional salary cap or allowing additional older players to try and ease that transition to where a league like the Can-Am is really coming into a younger Frontier League. And so now we've found this middle ground, and, with the addition of those, defections from minor league baseball, or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
A lot different players have become available. And I think even with COVID, you're still seeing everything still settle, regarding the player levels and, where those players are going to be. And I think that, as that continues to settle, we'll see where this new merger ends up and how the baseball is. Before last year, our league is a predominantly pitchers league.
Yeah. Massive
pitching. Just, pitching dominated. And then out of nowhere in 2022, the first year we really started playing each other here or there, it was more of an offensive league. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit of a change of pace. And, those changes are going to be part of this. And the only reason it's taken so long is because of this pandemic that we've gotten out of. And, it's going to be really cool to see the next 2-3 years of how both all these teams grow together, and we'll see what we come up with at the end.
Yeah, I definitely agree with in 21, it felt more like, almost like a stew, where you see it's all part of the same dish, but they're each their own ingredients still. Now it's more of like a sauce or a soup, where everything's kind of starting to come together and blend together, and it's really complementing each other. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that continued partnership, and seeing really how more of that like common ground gets established there, certainly. And I do also want to just talk about, if not for briefly, obviously there's been a bit of a rebrand with the league. They got their new logo, got the new site, putting more of an emphasis on online interaction and whatnot there. So there's been a lot of changes, really my point. And I just wonder, what's one of the positives, one of the negatives from that? We asked last week when we had Mick Ritter from the Grand Junction Jackalopes on, the same question. So I'll ask it again, which is, what's one of the positive things from this newer Frontier League, and one of the areas that they could do better in?
Well, as far as the rebrand goes, we definitely have a nice new slick logo. Yeah. And as far as the digital side of it, that is a process that is, we're still in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. And it's when you're not familiar with it, which I really was not, it's amazing how long these things take.
Yeah.
Not just changing logos, but changing websites and changing how your league operates in a digital world. And so the Frontier League has been making fantastic steps, in that. And, that is another thing that's going to be, not only will the baseball be growing, but this digital advancement of our league is going to be growing as well. And we'll see where we're going to be at. It'll be totally different next year. And the 2 years after that, there'll be steps that the league will take. And it's, that's a bit of an exciting thing for the league. Negatively, I'm trying to think of, change is always scary.
Yeah.
And that was true when we merged with the Can-Am League. It's true when you bring in new teams. It's true when you lose teams. And, I can't really speak for anything negatively, on this digital rebrand or the advancements of the league, the last couple of years. With the exception our travel bills are high, but that's the nature of the business. So, I'll gladly take that any day to see the progress that our league has been making.
Yeah, definitely there. And I imagine, as we were talking about just a moment ago, getting that new variety of team in there as well, it also helps in spicing it up a little bit. Everybody likes rivalries, but when something's a little bit newer, it also helps bring people in, certainly there. So on that note, I do have a question. I've noticed that Chicago has a very thriving indie ball market. You mentioned Schaumburg and I believe it was Joliet earlier as other Frontier League teams, but there's obviously teams in other leagues that are in that Chicago area. So I kind of wonder how you make your brand stand out. Obviously, the Bolts have been around, if I'm not mistaken, the longest out of all of them, and if not, certainly one of the longest teams, so they have that advantage. But how do you make your brand stand out amongst all the other independent leagues, or I guess now partner league teams in the area?
Well, we're the second oldest team in the Frontier League, active team that's still around, and we've been around the longest in the Chicagoland area. Teams have come and gone, in the Chicagoland area, and that includes, Schaumburg, Joliet, and there's been teams that have been added over in the association. And you're right, there is a massive amount of independent baseball in the Chicagoland area, and you can even go a little farther up into Wisconsin, right across the border.
Yeah.
And so, luckily for us, we are our ball club has been around for a long time. Our ballpark was built for the Frontier League in 1999, and so in a way, the league that we entered in, not in a way, the league that we entered in 1999 is unrecognizable to the league that we're in now. And so, one thing that our organization has done, to keep going and not having any change is, we're a predominantly south side of Chicago, southwest suburbs, team. Mm-hmm. Right up the tollway, our teams, right up another highway is another team. We can hit, if we have 30 to 45 minutes or an hour, we can hit 4 other teams. And so we take pride in the fact that we've been there for the south side of Chicago, for the southwest suburbs, neighborhoods like Beverly, Mount Greenwood in Chicago, the Orlands, the Paylesses, the Tinleys, the Oaklawns. That's our bread and butter. And so while our reach is probably not as big as the other teams, we have stayed within ourselves, and that's why we've been pretty successful in keeping this thing going. We just do it pretty quietly, and so it's not a matter of competing against the other teams. We know where our fans come from. We know who our customers are, and we're going to continue to provide them with family fun entertainment. And I don't see why anything's going to change.
Yeah. It's just about knowing your market, knowing your graphic. And, certainly I've seen that in New Jersey. For a while, we had a team in Newark. We had a team over in, not that far away over at Montclair State. We had a team in Sussex County, a team in Somerset, a team in Staten Island, the major league teams. We had a lot of baseball around here. So everybody had to find this 5 mile radius or this 10 mile radius, this is going to be the people we're going to appeal to. So I totally get saying this area is our people. We're going to serve these people. So I definitely get that. And I'm just kind of curious because I'm always a guy that likes, kind of interleague play, inter-tournament play. I've been pushing around an independent league World Series since this show started in 2019. So knowing that we have all these teams in the greater Chicagoland area, has the thought ever crossed your mind of trying to organize some sort of tournament with all of these teams? Maybe just the other Frontier League teams or maybe some of the other ones. But has that thought ever crossed your mind saying, you know what? If we had some time to do this at one point or another, this could be a fun kind of a little event to hold.
Well, anything formal, that's on a league level.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit of above my pay grade. But I will say that all of these teams in all of independent baseball, whether you were just looking to have something within the Chicago area or if you were looking to have something like an independent baseball championship, that is an intriguing thing. And I think, with the marathon type of atmosphere that this baseball is, it's a long season. And players know when they're going home. Yeah. Players know when the season's ending. And I think with the uncertainty of how you would set that up, that could be a little difficult.
Yeah.
But I will say that in the Chicagoland area, we play those other league teams quite often during the exhibition.
Yeah.
And so, we got a couple games that we'll have with Gary this year, and it's not the real thing at all. But it's not like we don't have relationships with those other teams.
Yeah, definitely. And I bring it up to every commissioner. I brought it up to Bill Lee. I brought it up to Josh Schaub. I brought it up to Rick White. I brought it up to everyone that runs one of these major leagues when we had them on. Every time I try to go, why don't you do the World Series? Why don't you do the World Series? Fully knowing the logistical issues behind it. And all of them were like, it sounds cool, but it sounds like a nightmare to plan. So we're going to take a pass on it. So I definitely get it. But, it's definitely something cool there. And I appreciate taking the time here. I only have one real major question left. And it's not even really a major question. It's something that I like to do around here because I do a lot of digging for each interview. I research it pretty well. And so, in this particular instance, I've found that you've pretty much been with this team since 1999 with the exception of a couple of years. And one of the first jobs you had when they were, Cook County Cheetahs was as a sound director. And I saw one particular news article, I think it was Chicago Tribune. You're describing it as, there's a 5 CD deck and I had an extra CD in case we needed it. So I want to know, what were some of the popular tracks in 1999 that you were playing, if you can remember? Because I'm very curious about this kind of thing.
Well, I really struggle to remember things from, a week ago or a month ago, let alone from 23 or 22 years ago. When the stadium was getting built, and it's a small stadium, and, I grew up on the south side. I grew up in Oak Lawn, and, I was so excited when the team was coming in. I felt it like, because at the time, the only team in the area was Kane County. Yeah. And I felt like this was going to be the Kane County Cougars of the South Side. Yeah. And so I wanted to be a part of it so bad. And so, I had a background in, public address announcing and game presentation with whether it be ice hockey or other baseball, tournaments. And so I was lucky enough to get a chance, get a position in there. And, but back then, I know some teams, there was a sound program that'd be on a computer. We weren't as lucky at the time, the Cheetahs in 99. And so, we had a 5-disc player and one, single disc. And I do remember having tons of lists of songs to know what discs were on, what songs were on what discs. And, you always have the 5-disc player was kind of your general, between inning stuff, your, you knew whatever you're going to play there was going to be pretty safe. Yeah. The disc player on the side, my personal one, it was just one little CD player. And that was for those moments that came up when it was unexpected, whether it was a big double, whether it was a home run, mostly pump up music. I guess jock jams and I used to make my own CDs and record songs. I couldn't even remember how to do that now. Yeah. And, I assume me telling my kids what a CD is would be the same thing as my dad telling me what an 8-track is. But, other than the Jock Jams music, man, I tell you what, go to Wikipedia, search Now That's What I Call Music, and there you go. Those are the types of music that we probably were playing.
Honestly, that's cool to hear, because I still drive an 03 Volvo, so I don't have like aux ports, I don't have Bluetooth, I have CDs, and I have a cassette deck in my car. So, so hearing all that, and I'm like, you know what, he's listing stuff where I know I have that CD.
Sure. I'm still a radio guy, because you don't know what's going to come up, and so I'll fish through radio stations that I like, and eventually you find a song, and there's several times a drive where you're like, yeah, I haven't heard the song in forever. I forgot the song existed. And so, I'm a radio guy myself.
Definitely. I mean, I've just become accustomed to it. Recently, New York took off my favorite radio station. They went under. So I've been desperately searching for the past 2 months now to try and find something to replace it, but you can't replace it. So,
sure.
I guess with that, I don't really have anything else left to ask. I know I had one question last week in our Q&A asking about the All-Star Game and why it was on a weekday. So I'm not sure if you want to address that here or not, but if you do, I'll give you some time now before I hand the floor over to you for some promotional work.
I don't got to do any promotional work, but I do. As far as that question goes, the league has always been those 2 days, Tuesday, Wednesday of. Usually it's during Major League Baseball's All-Star break. Yeah. And so, having it during the MLB All-Star break allows, for more scouts to be there.
I see.
And also, Tuesday, Wednesday is the way to go. There's no reason for us to take a weekend away from the half the league. Yeah. So that we can have, weekends are so valuable for teams. I mean, they're so valuable. And so with the skills competition or whatever a team would put on in the All-Star game, those events should hold themselves up, no matter what day they're on, because it is a special, unique thing. Yeah. And so, in particular, our area is so excited for it and our fans are so excited for it. And, there's no need for us to, there's no need for the league to put this on a weekend. This thing should hold water itself. Mm-hmm. And in that way, we can take another couple day break. And on Friday after the All-Star game, half our teams will be at home, and then they can do what they do best is those primetime games is what they want. So, but as far as your history on that, it's always been on Tuesdays and Wednesdays in the Frontier League. And I believe every independent league has theirs during the week. I'd be interested to know if anybody, busts the weekend for that.
I feel like the American Association has before. I don't know why. I feel like they may have. I'd have to look into that further to know. But that was when we first were discussing. I was like, that's probably why it's in the middle. I was figuring the weekend days were just too valuable for the league as a whole to kind of surrender that. And also it would hurt the team hosting it as well. Not necessarily hurt them, but it would take away an otherwise fairly safe prime date when you could otherwise just say, all right, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, middle of the week, weekday games, they're always a bit more, okay, let's see what we have here when we get to the ballpark. And if you could go ahead and kind of guarantee those days to be safer, you're going to do that and protect the other prime dates. So I assume that was the reason. That's kind of what I said. But, yeah, I figured I'd just bring it up. While I have you here, I might as well ask the guy that would know best. So,
sure.
So yeah, as I said though, before we came on, as I just said, yeah, I'm going to give you 5 minutes here to say anything you want to say. Go back to any topic we may have already discussed and move down a little too quick on. Bring up something that we didn't discuss that you wanted to hit on. Or, like I said, I know you said you didn't have anything to promote, but if you changed your mind the last 2 minutes, the floor is yours to do any of the above that I mentioned.
No, I do appreciate the time, Nick, and I appreciate you reaching out to talk. And, we are looking forward to bringing the whole league to Crestwood and to the Chicago Southland this upcoming July. And hopefully we do something different at the skills competition before we have that traditional All-Star on that Wednesday. So we are looking forward to it. Bring some nice attention, much needed attention to our area and to our ballpark and our team. And we're looking forward to it, and we're going to put a little Southside twist on this event. So, again, Nick, I do appreciate the time.
I appreciate you coming on and taking the time to discuss with us. You're more than welcome to be back on again when we get closer to the season. All right, we'd just like to thank Mike for coming on the show again. Definitely appreciate him taking time out of his day. I know when we first tried to get him on, we called him and he was in the middle of shoveling a bunch of snow because it was a blizzard. We did this last week, actually almost exactly a week ago when you're listening to this. So, he's just had to rearrange some things, but he still managed to carve out some time after, taking care of the winter weather, to do this. So we do appreciate that. And when we get closer to the spring and closer to opening day, I'd love to have him on and maybe try to get, his manager on as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, of course, Rishi Sexton, a big name, and a lot of eyes on him this season, and it's his first time as a manager and as an indie ball manager as well.
Yep, certainly there, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting city in Windy, or it's going to be an interesting year in Windy City. So
interesting city in Windy.
Yeah. Thank God I have the ability to edit that.
Can you please make that? Okay, Nick, you got to make that the title of this episode.
What, a windy year or a windy city?
No, no, wait, what did you say? It's like...
Good thing it's not on record.
A city in Windy?
Yeah, a city in Windy.
I think that's solid.
A city in the wind? I could go with that. It rolls a little bit better. It's more pleasing.
Okay. You can make the final call, but I think it should be a play off that, because there you go. There's your name. I'm
down for that, I mean, you gotta name it after the interview guest, and there's not too much else to pull from, so...
sometimes the names of episodes just speak to you.
Exactly.
And you just pop up and right away, that's it.
It just hits you in the face like a gust of wind,
That's true, in the city.
In the city, yeah. But, enough with the, I guess, midway puns. I suppose we should actually get to the news of the week, or I guess of the past 2 weeks, actually, for the whole back half of December, really. There's no bigger news than what's happening in Winnipeg. Obviously, a long-time manager, Rick Forney, only the third manager in Goldeye's history. He left this offseason after spending about 16 years with the Goldeye's organization. And for a while now, there's been kind of a void, wondering who's going to fill in his spot here. Only two other guys besides Rick had held that spot. And I mean, one of them was Hal Lanier, who obviously is an accomplished baseball man himself, and then Doug Simiak being the other guy who obviously a little bit more well known for being in Fargo as opposed to Winnipeg, but still all well-known guys. So it's a very, I guess, coveted position, and also a position that comes with some weight, with some expectation to it. And last week we got our answer to that, and it would be Greg Taggart. Obviously, we all remember Greg Taggart from his 27 years of experience and 16 years in Gary South Shore. He's now the fourth manager in Winnipeg Goldeye's team history. A little background in case we've forgotten about Greg Taggart, or at least his accomplishments. He was originally signed away to the Giants organization. He has since come back now to indie ball and essentially is taking the manager's job in one of the very few spots he said he'd ever be interested in managing again in. And he has 12 of 16 winning seasons in Gary, 3 championships, the most recent of which being 2013. So it's been a little bit of a little bit of rougher times. And yeah, he's the replacement for Rick Forney. It'll be an interesting way of seeing it here. He has an interesting managerial style and an interesting way of running his ball club, but there obviously is a lot of success in that too, even if the kind of back end of his tenure in Gary wasn't exactly the pinnacle of success.
Yeah, I think I can see why, for example, the first question I think when you look at a guy like Taggart is, hey, well, he was with the Giants. Well, what caused him to leave? You don't know for sure, But I think that just Winnipeg is a unique job, like he said, because it comes with, well, you mentioned the expectations, Nick, that come along with winning in Winnipeg, just because of what they've done over recent years, and also just the fact that it's a position that comes with a lot of stability and a track record of stability. Something that a word that you don't hear very often when you talk about independent league baseball and stability. Those two phrases do not go together usually. So I think as far that's probably about as well as Winnipeg could have done with a hire, getting Greg Taggart to come back and manage. Now, I think the point that you brought up at the end of what you said, Nick, is kind of important to acknowledge, because yes, Taggart has an unbelievable track record. He does. He's managing Gary, and certainly the Winnipeg organization is an upgrade over Gary, and all that can be true. However, Gary, he didn't leave. It's not like Gary was that great at the end of his tenure.
Yeah.
I'm not going to act like I'm an expert, and I know why, and because I'm not there. But I think it's something to acknowledge that, hey, he's the 12 winning records in 16 seasons. I mean, that's certainly a great point, but it didn't end great. So something interesting to keep an eye on. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think Winnipeg should have hired him given the opportunity, because you're not going to do probably much better at this point than bringing in a guy like Taggart. But I do find it at least interesting, and it's something at least to discuss, that, hey, at the end of his tenure in Gary, it didn't really end well as far as wins and losses. And you wonder how that could transition to Winnipeg.
Yeah, I do wonder that as well, because it's just it wasn't great there. And what I heard from some of the former Railcap players, because I talked to a handful, about half a dozen, or a few more than that, and they all were like, he's a great guy, but some of the ways he manages are a little out of date. And I mean, he's 59, so he's not incredibly old, but he's also not new to the game. We talked to a lot of younger managers. We talked to Anthony Barone. We talked to Michael Schlatt. We talked to a bunch of guys that are, younger guys, and they have a certain philosophy about them. And it's maybe not the case for guys that have been around for a while. Obviously, 27 years of managerial experience, a guy that, has been doing this since he was 32. So he has experience, yeah, but if you're not updating the way you coach to fit the players you have, then you better be damn sure that you're going out and getting guys that work well in the kind of environment that you create. Otherwise, it's not going to be a successful product on the field. You're going to have a harder time recruiting guys in. Now, granted, of course, when you just want a spot in a place to showcase your talent, you're not going to be nearly as picky as you would otherwise be. But that still being said, there's a lot of guys that say the way things were done weren't exactly like the way it had been done for me in the past on different levels. So there was a 4-man rotation that we do know about. I mean, obviously anyone that watched the Railcats knows they ran a 4-man rotation, which is just really odd in today's day and age of baseball. It'd be one thing if it was a 4-man rotation, but it's okay, we're using them as openers, 3-4 innings. Then okay, fine, you're not putting as much mileage on there, but to still expect them to go, 5, 6, 7 innings the whole length of the year on a 4-man rotation, like it's 1962, is a bit odd. But yeah, there's just a lot of things like that. And I do wonder, are you going to be able to really be able to run that system in Winnipeg, a place that already, players aren't exactly thrilled about going to, even though it is a great organization. I do want to make that clear. It's in Canada, so that's a holdup for some people. So I do wonder if that's going to be a problem. And, like I said, I like the hire from an experience standpoint, and I do agree with you. Well, I don't think at this stage we're going to get anyone better. And I do think Taggart will have some mileage in Winnipeg. Obviously, Winnipeg's shown that they like to be loyal to their guys. They have a guy and they'll stick with him. And, I think he probably does have 5 or 6 years in him before maybe he decides, okay, I'm 64, 65. Maybe now's the time to call it quits. And then you can go somewhere else on that. But I do question it, just in case the situation becomes similar to Gary, where you're using methods that used to work, but no longer work. And I think if he would have had, a lot more success in the last couple of years that Gary was there, or that he was in Gary rather, then it would be a different conversation we're having, but it really wasn't quite the same.
Right. And I think you could also look at it in a sense of, hey, like, since they had their big championship in 2013 as well, but since 2011, or since that championship season from 2014 on, they've made the playoffs twice and have not gotten out of the first round. So and with the last 3 years, a combined record of 121 and 178. So I think that I think that it's something to at least acknowledge. Now, it could have the opposite effect, right? Because it could have Taggart being like, okay, I need to change. Like, and that's not to say that, I mean, a 4-man rotation to me, I'll go ahead and say it. I think a 4-man rotation is ridiculous. Like, ridiculous. But I think that, I think it could also have the opposite impact where he's kind of willing to adapt and change, and in that way really improve the team and improve the record and bring the skills that he does have to the table. So, and you look at similar, and of course Major League Baseball is Major League Baseball, but you've seen a couple of those types of managers have some success. Your Buck Showalters, and your Dusty Bakers, who, are they old school in and of itself, or like are they old school at heart? Yes, but they're willing to adapt. And they've shown that they're willing to adapt and have success in relating to the players and stuff like that. So will that happen here? I guess we'll see. But the resume speaks for itself, and I definitely think for Winnipeg it's a good hire based on the timing as well. And we'll see how it goes, but like I think there's some questions that go with it as well.
Yeah, definitely there. And I mean, there's also the counterpoint too of, while Taggart's methods may not work for winning games for the team as a whole, he also did get several guys signed to major league rosters or to major league organizations. And that's pretty true. I mean, if you look at the Railcats, there's a handful of pitchers that got picked up there. There's a handful of other players that got picked up. And there's certainly something to be said about that. It's just overall, I'll be interested to see how it goes. So, definitely something to watch. Definitely a curious proposition. And one thing I'm going to be very interested to see here is, how Winnipeg does in relation to how York does. Because obviously Rick Forney left Winnipeg to take the job in York, which is just a closer to home type position for him. But I'll be interested to see how those two teams do. Because York, while they've had their moments over the past few years, they haven't really had a truly great season in some time. So to see how these two teams are going to go is going to be very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because a lot of, when I love the saying when people look at it like, and when looking at how valuable either a player or a coach is what happens, like obviously you could look at what they do while they're there, and you should, but what happens when they leave? Right?
Yeah.
And especially when Forney goes from a place like Winnipeg where there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of winning, and there's tradition and expectation, and he meets those expectations time and time again. Goes to a place like York, where there hasn't inevitably they're going to need to really turn it around in the record department. So I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Winnipeg when Forney leaves, and what kind of value does he add to York. And I think it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to follow Taggart and Forney kind of in comparison to one another, even though they are in different leagues and very different circumstances.
Yep, absolutely. And that's another thing that goes to Taggart's credit as well. I mean, it's not like his replacement in Gary was doing too much better. I mean, Rogers did fine, but I mean, Gary still didn't have a great year, still missed the postseason in a league where practically everyone made the postseason this past year, with the exception of 4 teams. So, maybe it was more of a Gary issue. Maybe maybe it's something else. I don't know, but it is going to be very interesting to see. And one thing is for dead certain, the Gold Eyes Open in Gary, Indiana on May the 11th. I feel like that game all of a sudden becomes a lot more interesting to watch.
Hot dog.
Is that not now the game you watch on the 11th?
Oh, for sure. 1,000%.
Because I feel like if you're Gary, you got to put together some sort of like thank you, Greg thing. Like, because obviously they did that already when he left for the Giants org. But now you have the chance to kind of put together like a little, I guess, video message. You got the opportunity to really kind of celebrate him coming back. But obviously you want to keep it within the bounds of like, hey, you're still competing against us and trying to beat us.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like it really adds to the opening day atmosphere, you know?
Yeah, it sure does. And I'm sure that they will treat him very nicely and have tributes and all that good stuff for the fans when he comes back. But then, once the first pitch is thrown, then it's all business at that point. But it is a very interesting storyline for American Association opening day for sure.
Definitely is. So on that note, we will switch over to the other piece of news from the past week. Like I said, we did have Banana Ball too, but it's just them adding more dates. And at this point, it seems kind of irrelevant. But one thing that isn't irrelevant for you Atlantic League fans is the Ballpark Pass is back. It was introduced in 2022. And in case you need a quick refresher as to what it was, essentially, if you're a season ticket holder, you had access to all the other ballparks in the Atlantic League. So let's say you had 2 season tickets and you're a Long Island Ducks season ticket holder. You could then go to Staten Island and you'd have 2 tickets waiting for you there. It'd be complimentary. No, don't have to pay. I don't know the quality of the seat. I think it's probably just like, here's 2 tickets, have fun. But you could do that to any ballpark there. So as many season tickets as you owned, you had access to that many tickets at every other ballpark. Pretty straightforward. That said, I don't really know how well it did because I just don't know too many Atlantic League season ticket holders. So if there's any of them out there that want to say how much they took advantage of that, I'd be very interested in hearing that. It is a cool perk. It is a neat little perk. There is an incentive there, certainly to go out and, buy the season tickets to support your team here. And I do wish they would have done this more when the league was more regionalized. Now it's obviously spread out more along the whole Atlantic coastline, which makes it live up to its name more, yes. But back when you had like Camden and Bridgeport and Newark and Long Island and Somerset all in the same league, all in the same grouping there, and then like your faraway teams were like Sugarland and Lancaster and Southern Maryland and York. It's like realistically then, if you're a season ticket holder for anyone, say Sugarland, you could realistically say, oh, cool, we could do like a whole like 3-day weekend trip to some of these major like hub areas and see 2 or 3 games at all of them. And you could have really got some use out of it. Now, when it's more spread out, I do wonder how much use it gets. Like, if you're a Duck season ticket holder, Staten Island probably is the one that's happening a lot. Maybe the Pennsylvania teams, but you're probably not going, to Southern Maryland all that much. You're probably not going down to North Carolina. You're probably not going out to West Virginia or Lexington either. So, I wonder how much use it gets now that it's more spread out. It's still a cool perk, don't get me wrong. I just wonder its usefulness at times.
Yeah, in my view, I honestly don't think it even matters how much use it gets, because it's not like it doesn't really cost teams anything. And I think that it's just a good way to try and convince people to be seats and ticket holders in their local markets and try to kind of travel to those closer markets as well. So I think it's it's a cool perk. I really liked it. The idea of it last year kind of, when you make a good point about when it would have been nicer when everything was more regionalized, which is definitely true. But I think that, it's regardless of whether or not it gets used. I do think it's a good idea for the Atlantic League to have that as an opportunity to be taken advantage of, regardless. Because at the end of the day, if nobody does it, nobody does it. Who cares? But it is a good perk that I think they should have available. And it just encourages people to kind of follow their teams and travel on the road, especially for, even though the league as a whole is more spread out, you still have, almost like two teams each that are like close-ish to each other. You have like Lexington, West Virginia, High Point, Gastonia, Long Island, Staten Island, obviously Lancaster, York, and then Southern Maryland, Frederick. So each team kind of has a buddy, you could say.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, a rival if you want to take it the other way. But I think that makes this sort of realistic and a good idea. So regardless of whether or not people use it, I think it's a good idea and it should be available to the fans. And I like that it's returning.
Yeah, I definitely do like it being there. I agree with pretty much everything you said there. And I just wish we had more perks to it, but I do like it. It's definitely creative and it's something that I think, I'd like to see other teams do. I mean, certainly like if the Frontier League did that, I would definitely be more interested in either picking up like a Jackals season ticket or a Miners season ticket, because I'm like, okay, you know what? I could go to Rockland, I could go to I could go to Sussex, I could go to New Jersey. Maybe I decide one weekend, all right, I'll go up to Tri-City. You could go ahead and kind of do all that. I imagine it's a bit more difficult when you got border crossings involved. I don't think the Canadian teams really want to be like, okay, we'll be participant in it. I don't know the exact troubles that would come from it, but I imagine there are some that are still there. And yeah, I do think it's interesting. I think it's definitely a fun thing to do. But I just had this one random thought about the Atlantic League, and it could really be for any league. And I just want to hear what your thoughts are on it before we kind of go to close up the show this week. So the thought I had is kind of redoing the playoff structure a bit. And I know we always talk about this, but it would be a really interesting way of doing that I don't think any professional league currently uses. And it's basically saying you must meet a certain winning percentage threshold in order to qualify for the postseason.
Okay, so then the bracket kind of changes?
Yeah, so essentially, divisions wouldn't matter unless you have multiple teams qualifying from the same division. So let's say you have, let's just set it like a 550 winning percentage, okay? Like you gotta win at least 55% of your games in order for you to qualify for the postseason. So if you meet that threshold, and let's say 3 teams in the North Division meet it and only 2 teams in the South Division, I'm not sure the math would work out in that particular instance, but just run with it for a minute because it'll make the scenario a little bit easier. In the North Division that has those 3 teams, the team with the top winning percentage, assuming there isn't a tie, and if there is a tie, go to head-to-head record, then go inter-division record, and then you can keep going down the list for tiebreakers, whatever, you determine to be the most fair as you go down the list. But the top winning percentage would get a bye into the next round. The other 2 would go ahead and they would play each other, best of 3, best of 5, whichever you prefer. And then once their series is done, you go on, you play that top team, and then we have our winner coming out of the North. Over in the South, it'd be pretty straightforward, just 2 teams, boom, boom, they play each other, and winner goes on to the final. So on one hand, you are penalized a bit if you have a better division because you got to play more teams, more games, but we're also ensuring that we're not having any kind of weaker opponents in there. Likewise, let's say if we only have, 3 teams as a whole across the whole league that are, winning percentage, then one could go ahead and just automatically qualify for the final, I guess, if they win the division with the top winning percentage. Or if we have a rare scenario where nobody qualifies, maybe the number isn't 550, maybe it's higher than that, and nobody reached that threshold because it was just a very even year. At that point, you can just take the top 2 winning percentage teams, regardless of division, and put them against it. I know it's a really kind of far out there idea, and it's one I just kind of came up with on the fly. I didn't really put too much thought into it, but I think it could be an interesting way of doing things.
I think that for me, in order for it to really work, you would have to ditch divisions.
Okay.
And to ensure that the schedules are equal, are as equal as they can be. So I think that'd be my first problem with it. And I think the second one is I just think it kind of takes out the incentive of individual head-to-head matchups that for the division or for something else. Not that for example in the 8-team American Association it really matters as far as picking your team or whatever, but yeah. I think that I don't know, it's just I worry about it a system like that, one being uneven because of divisions, and two, I would worry about it being kind of disincentivizing some regular season, into some like head-to-head regular season matchups, that make baseball so great.
I definitely understand that concern. I also just think, though, that with a system like that, it makes you play more. Because now, if you, obviously in this situation, you could get rid of the whole, division half champions in this. So now, if you're, say, Lexington, who cruises in the first half of the year, like they did in 21, and then they kind of just, put her in park or put her in neutral for the second half of the year, it no longer incentivizes that, right? It incentivizes you to keep going out there, keep playing, keep trying to win games, and not to do any sort of player management type strategies. It incentivizes you to say, all right, we can't afford to let our winning percentage drop. So now matchups that otherwise would have been pretty meaningless have some sort of meaning to them. That's my kind of thinking that it keeps everything alive. Now, I will agree, the end of the season race, all of a sudden, for a lot of teams, is going to be kind of pointless, because either you're going to be at a 440 winning percentage with no reasonable path to get to that, whatever the magic number threshold is. And then other teams are going to be, pretty well set above it, wherever it may be. So I'd agree on that front, but I do think there is some merit to it.
I think there's definitely some merit. It's just, I don't know. I love those individual matchups kind of down the stretch. And I don't know, there's a team who clinched at least a 55% winning percentage, kind of chill down the stretch. I don't know. I think that I would rather have more head-to-head base than just a blanket thing where the bracket changes and could be odd numbers, and sometimes there's buys, sometimes there's not, and it doesn't really depend on how you do, but how other teams do. I don't know. It's just probably too complicated for my liking.
All right. I mean, it's fair enough. Like I said, it's just kind of an off the top one. I didn't really think it out too much, and I thought it could be an interesting way of doing things. So, certainly something that I just wanted to throw out there to let people think about. So, on that note, we don't really have too much else to talk about. I'm pretty sure we'll have eclipsed the hour mark at this point. So I think you got your money's worth, which is to say you didn't pay anything, because this is a free show, out of this week. So, with that said, we'll go to the plugs and then we'll get out of here. So you guys can enjoy the rest of your New Year's Eve. That said, plugs. You can follow the show on Twitter at IndieBallPod, on Instagram at IndieBallReport, and at ALPB_news. You can also go ahead and find the show on the website, IndieBallReport.com, where we're going to very shortly be putting up more articles again. We're going to actually make a concerted effort to try and get 1 or 2 a month up on there, as well as some other content that's going to be coming in the new year too. Then also all the shows are there. All the show notes are there as well too. So be sure to check out IndieBallReport.com for all of those needs. That being said, you could also find the show wherever you find podcasts: TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You know the drill. All of those platforms and more, for finding the show. Rate, review, subscribe if you can. That said, anything else left to add this week?
I think a fun way to close out the week, Nick, is, I don't know, I guess pick the college football playoff semifinals. I'm going to go, ready for this one?
Yep.
I think Michigan will beat TCU by a decent amount. I think Georgia wins, but really close. That's my opinion. I don't know.
So, I have too many Michigan and Ohio State people on my timeline, so for that alone, I'm pulling for TCU, and, I mean, I really don't like the Big Ten or the SEC, so there's no winner in the Georgia game. So, I guess I'll go Georgia, and I'm just wanting TCU to pull it out. I don't expect them to. But, yeah, screw it. We're going to go TCU in Georgia based off of absolutely nothing.
Well, fair enough then.
Yep. All I know is the Duke Blue Devils are a football school now. We won the Military Bowl and went 9-4 in the year, losing in those 4 losses, losing by a combined 16 points, so not very bad at all. And, we tripled our win total or win expectation coming into this year. And, I'm just on cloud 9, and Mike Elko should be paid whatever he demands, so that way he remains in Durham for as long as humanly possible. He's a godsend, really. In fact, the best way to describe Mike Elko is he's exactly what Rutgers people thought they were getting in Greg Schiano. So,
yeah, okay. Put Duke in the Big Ten East. We'll see how well they would have done.
I'm sorry. We're 9-4 and won a bowl game.
Yeah, but I mean, okay. So again, put Duke in the Big Ten East, and you're having to play Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan every single season, and let me know how that goes.
What I heard is we go 1-3 against them every year.
For us?
For Duke. I'm thinking Duke can go 1-3 against them. I don't think we beat Penn State, Ohio State, or Michigan, but I think we can beat Michigan State.
Well, it depends on the year, because sometimes Michigan State's nasty, so.
And sometimes Michigan's just a tire fire, so. Obviously everything depends on the year. And we'll revisit this in a year's time from now, once Duke goes through their gauntlet schedule next year, where they play Clemson and Notre Dame back to back, then they play Pitt, and then they get UNC. So. Okay. It's going to be a not fun schedule next year, but I will tell you this much. If we can take 2 or 3 from Notre Dame, Clemson, and UNC, I will be thrilled. You don't understand
how... If you can take 2 out of 3, that's winning the lottery there.
If we somehow manage to sweep them, I honestly don't know what I'm going to do. If we manage to take 3 of 4 in that 4-game stretch, then
you're probably in playoff consideration.
We should be. If you're able to knock... you do know, what will happen is we'll lose to, Florida State or some bullshit, and then we'll be, going from ranked 13th in the nation to 25th, or just drop right out. And it'll make no sense whatsoever. But if we beat Clemson, I'm gonna be stunned. I do think it is at Duke. I don't think it's at Clemson. But if it is at Clemson, and we beat Clemson at Clemson, is that an exaggeration to call it the biggest win in program history in the last 70 years?
No, not at all.
Because, I feel like it is. The only one that would be bigger, I think you got to go back to, the 40s or 50s when they won the Orange Bowl. So, we're talking a very long time. Sonny Jurgensen was the quarterback when they won the Orange Bowl.
Right.
So, it would be something else. So, I'm still on cloud 9 there. I expect very little out of next season. Honestly, bowl eligible next year, and I will take that and run with it because of the difficulty that is on that schedule. But hey, who knows that? And I only got 2 other things left to add this week before we get in here, and I'll be quick about it. One, I know nobody really likes it, but I like doing it, so I'm going to do it anyway. Top 3, bottom 3 movies of 2022 from me next week, because I'm trying to get to the movies today on the Friday, because I have a whole birthday's rewards that I got to use before tomorrow when they expire. And also because there's 3 I really want to see in theaters that I got to try and get in, so that way I can get them in the ranking, because I only count things I see in the year of and in a theater for year of. Otherwise it doesn't feel right counting it in the list. That's first off. And secondly, I gotta address this because this is another thing I see way too much on my personal timelines, both Twitter and Instagram. There's too many people that are about my age, that's, 25, 26, that are, they're writing autobiographies. I've seen 3 or 4 of them in the past 3 or 4 months. And I gotta be honest, I think the number of people under the age of 35 that could confidently write their autobiography then is well under 1,000 people. I gotta be honest with you. I just don't think that there's too many people that should be writing their autobiography before they're eligible to be president of the United States. Just because I don't think you could possibly write a compelling enough novel that to justify my time for that. If you want to write, a novel, fine. You want to write a poetry book? I could see that being good. There's examples of that. There are types of literature you can write, and I can confidently say, this may not be bad, or this may actually be good. And, that could work. But an autobiography is where I draw the line. You should not be writing your autobiography before you're 35. And there's just way too many that I've seen in my timeline. If there was 1 or 2, I could chalk it up to some people just kind of having a delusion of grandeur. But the fact that this is 5, 6 people tells me this isn't a delusion of grandeur. This is like an actual thing. And I hate it so much.
That does sound dumb, I agree. But I haven't seen much of it, so I can't really comment, but it does sound dumb.
Yeah. Like, I'm honestly starting to think, like, should I be writing a book? Because of how many books and autobiographies I've been seeing promoted on my timelines. Because I feel like I could write a book that's at least 150 pages and not terrible. And I feel like that's the standard nowadays. So, if in 8 months from now I come back and I'm promoting a book on this show, understand that I finally snapped and just said, screw it, I'm writing a book to prove that I can and that I'm part of this trend. I want people to know that. And also, unlike a lot of people that I'm seeing, because I click the Amazon links for this that they're promoting these books on, and it's not like they're selling these things cheap. These are like $15, $20 people are hawking these books for. And I'm sorry, I'm not buying your debut book for $15. It's not going to happen. I need you to have a proven track record before I buy a book at $15. So that's just the case. That also needs to be interesting too. That's an important part too. But more important than all of that, price your books well. If you priced it at $8, you'll actually get some sales. You're pricing at $15, sales ain't going to be there. So if I wind up doing this in 8 months when I'm hawking a book, I promise you it'll be under $5 because I don't expect people to actually pay for an introductory work. That is going to be of middling quality. That's all I have to say on that.
Not where I thought that we would end the show, but yeah.
Okay. Sometimes it goes in unexpected places, and that's why you always got to be ready for it. That's why on this show you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes you're just left kind of stunned, wondering what the hell you just listened to. And honestly, it's a fair reaction. And that's why we say, until next time, don't forget to play ball.